I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you can find all that we do over at undergroundusa.com. Well, Joe Biden said his official goodbye to the nation, allegedly, in his farewell speech to the nation, which most people decided not to watch. The fact is this: Biden has been beyond a lame duck president since the Obama machine shelved him as the Democrat candidate. But his farewell address had some things worthy of being addressed, even if for their obvious hypocrisy and the telegraphing of his and his administration's misdeeds. I've edited his speech down to a few points and hurried his speech along. So if you're someone who thought Biden was a good president, no, I'm not taking him out of context. So feel free to go about your day in your bizarre pseudo-utopian bubble. In this first clip, Biden discusses the importance of treating everyone with dignity, justice, and fairness.
A nation holding the torch of the most powerful idea ever in the history of the world, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness.
Without time enough to blink, the question erupted. So what happened to Donald Trump's right to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness? He was denied each for his tenure and Biden's term. He was called Hitler, they mocked his appearance, turned a blind eye to his benevolence to call him greedy, and denied him fair treatment socially, professionally, and judicially. But that set the tone for Biden's speech. He'd go on to disingenuously serve up one hypocrisy after another, even as he telegraphed his own opportunistic actions before and during his presidency. In the following clip, Biden has the unmitigated gall to say that we all must have the backbone to stand up to those who abuse power.
But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it, are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example, whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press.
You have to wonder if he really doesn't understand that he's describing exactly what he and his administration, Obama 2.0, have done for 8 years. He talks about respecting the institutions of government, yet at every turn, he transformed whole departments and agencies of our federal government into weapons against his enemies and the American people. And to even suggest that he is a proponent of free and independent media, when his and his party's relationship with the mainstream media was both nepotistic and sympathetic, stinks a vomitous stench of untruth. We haven't had a free and independent press since the days of Woodrow Wilson, and it's only gotten worse over the years. And then Biden made these obnoxious claims.
And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration in a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And we've pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more.
The claim that his administration did anything to protect our children should earn Biden his own private circle in Dante's world. There has never been a more egregious push to normalize gender dysphoria than during the Biden administration. The entirety of his staff, appointees et al., were obsessed with sexuality and the sexualization of our children, and they were so to the point where they attempted to come between the sacred bond of parent and child. The Biden administration did more to corrupt the family unit than 100 years of Planned Parenthood, and that's saying a lot. He then went on to falsely claim that crime, violent crime, is down across the nation. This is a flat-out lie. In fact, crime is so bad in many locales that people stopped reporting crimes because there's too much of it for our law enforcement officers to address. Listen to any urban area police scanner on any given night, and especially on Friday and Saturday nights, and all you hear is shots fired. Those aren't the radio calls of a low crime rate. And I suppose it's easy to claim that you've created 17 million jobs when you first eliminated 17 million jobs by destroying businesses during a so-called pandemic. But don't worry. There are more people with health insurance than ever before. Now, all they have to do is schedule appointments 13 months into the future because there are too many illegal immigrants in the waiting rooms thanks to the Biden administration's giving them all free health care on the taxpayer's dime. Then we come to Biden's warnings for all to heed. For some reason, Biden felt he had the mental acuity to channel his inner Eisenhower to forewarn of ghosts of the future.
And I wish the incoming administration success because I want America to succeed. That's why I've upheld my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example. I have no doubt that America is in a position to continue to succeed. That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes. We see the same dangers of a concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
A peaceful transition of power? I suppose the Bidens and their White House staff won't barricade themselves in the Oval Office. Still, with the rapid-fire executive orders coming out of Biden's administration in the waning days of his presidency, he's certainly setting Rome on fire for the incoming president. I'm half expecting to hear he's posthumously pardoned Charles Manson and awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But the most sickening thing in his speech, to me, is his telegraphing of the dangers of a new oligarchy. Yes, he was trying to paint that color onto Trump, his incoming administration, and his potentate supporters. But he was describing exactly what he, the Democrats, Hollywood, Silicon Valley billionaires, George Soros, and the World Economic Forum orcs have had assembled since the days of the Clinton administration. Biden was speaking of the deep state inside the Beltway bureaucracy, the very entity that Donald Trump now has a mandate from the people to destroy. And he validated this by warning of the mis- and disinformation that will rule the social media threads because his beloved fact-checkers, read government-anointed censors, are being abandoned by most social media organizations. So much so that many fact-checking companies are going belly up. And I can't say good enough times about that. But he continues to incriminate not only himself, but the entirety of the deep state apparatus.
You know, in the years ahead, it'll help to be, it's going to be up to the presidency, the Congress, the courts, the free press, and the American people to confront these powerful forces. We must reform the tax code, not by giving the biggest tax cuts to billionaires, but by making them begin to pay their fair share. We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office.
Reform the tax code? Biden had 4 years to do something about a corrupt and inequitable Internal Revenue Service and did absolutely nothing. In fact, he fueled the beast by feeding it personnel. But hey, he's right. We should scrap the entire damn tax code from top to bottom and craft a consumption tax that can never be raised, with no add-ons or extras. That would force the federal government to establish and maintain a budget. Then he dared to complain about dark money in politics when Democrats, his party, have thrived off of dark money political donations since before the Clinton administration. Obama and Biden were even caught accepting donations from overseas. Look into Act Blue if you need proof. And you have to see Nancy Pelosi's dentures fall into her Chardonnay glass at Biden's suggestion that Congress be forbidden from playing the stock market. I mean, really. How will the Congress creatures exit office as millionaires if they can't inside trade and influence legislation for profit? However, the moment the possibility of a lightning strike was presented was when Biden addressed the issue of holding a president accountable to the law. Honestly, I agree. And by his own request, the incoming Attorney General, which looks like Pam Bondi, should appoint a special prosecutor and make sure Congress seats him or her to investigate the actions of both then-Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And lastly, Biden circled back to complain about that darn oligarchy again.
And in a democracy, there's another danger. There's the concentration of power and wealth. It erodes a sense of unity and common purpose. It causes distrust and division. Participating in our democracy becomes exhausting and even disillusioning. And people don't feel like they have a fair shot. We have to stay engaged in the process. I know it's frustrating. A fair shot is what makes America America. Everyone's entitled to a fair shot. Not a guarantee, but just a fair shot. An even playing field. Going as far as your hard work and talent can take you. We can never lose that essential truth. Remain who we are. America can be defined by one word: possibilities.
Now, much to my surprise, I agreed completely with the sentiment in his final points, but again, he telegraphed precisely what he and his neo-Marxist ilk have done to the people of the United States over the past 16 years. They've used identity politics and the smear of racism to divide our country. Rather than creating that level playing field for every American, they've embraced the discriminatory neo-Marxist tenet of equity of outcome over equality of opportunity. They have demonized the white heterosexual male as a second class, onto which all the blame for every ill of our nation, past, present, and future, must be placed. We have to suffer 2 more days of these divisive assholes. And I'm sure there will be some parting shots as he and his leave the White House and the Naval Observatory. But there's a new dawn on the horizon, and it is filled with a return to normalcy, or at least the hopes of that eventuality. Now, all we have to do is make sure the congressional Republicans don't fuck everything up like they did with Paul Ryan's Congress in 2016. There's never any guarantee that Republicans can't snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. 2 more days. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL, AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Wokeism is a threat to the very foundations of our great nation and to the very principles of liberty and justice. The goal of wokeism is to divide us, pitting Americans against one another based on race, gender, and identity. This ideology undermines free speech and open dialogue, which are the bedrock of our republic. It promotes censorship and cancels anyone who dares to challenge its extreme agenda. We must stand against this cultural Marxism and protect our constitutional rights. Say no to wokeism.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
I don't know, Frank. I'm sure you share in the elation that we don't have Michelle Obama, but Barack is going to be there. But, Michelle Obama's going to send a powerful message by not attending.
You forgot to mention that because it's Martin Luther King Day, all the people who will be protesting don't actually have to miss a day of work.
Yeah,
oh, wait.
It's a benefit.
Oh, wait. They usually don't work.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
That's right. Oh man, it's gonna be cold, but it's going to be great. I think.
Oh, and this whole thing about Michelle Obama, okay, great. I'm not a fan. I think she's one of the most divisive first ladies that we've ever had. She didn't really deserve the honor, but you don't get to pick who a president marries. When someone comes out and says that this is the first time I've ever been proud of my country, well, boy, thanks for nothing. Yeah. But so what? So she's not going. So what? Good. It's one extra seat for somebody who wants to honor the tradition.
No kidding. Well, but in contrast, you've got Barack Obama, and he was sitting there sort of palling around with Donald Trump at the Jimmy Carter services. This is really just opposite ends at this point. It's really kind of entertaining to watch Barack Obama sort of laugh and carry on with Donald Trump, and then here comes Michelle. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But I just think when they say she's sending a powerful message, I'm thinking, how does she send a powerful message? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what is she going to be on the cover of Vogue again for the 50th time. I mean, who cares? Michelle Obama is yesterday. She is inconsequential now. Her and her husband grifted their way to the top. They're multimillionaires right now because they succeeded in grifting their way to the top with, I don't know, 4 mansions, I guess. So okay, you figured it out. You did it. You gamed the system. You're an avowed militant radical. We get that. If they ever unsealed her paper from Princeton, you'd realize she's an illiterate. But okay, fine. Go off into the Maui sunset over there. I figured that's where you spend most of your time, and be gone. Be gone. I mean, the Obama 2.0 is over in 3 days, or beginning to be over in 3 days. The purge has to happen. But that era, we're seeing it. DEI is dying. Wokeism is dying. The radicals sound like idiots in the face of catastrophe in Los Angeles and North Carolina. We're seeing failed states where that ideology has been supreme for at least the last 16 years in New York, Illinois, and California. So that experiment in neo-Marxism proved to be a failure. Now we just have to actually give the examples of their failures and reinforce them so people move on from that lunacy.
Yep, exactly right. Well, speaking of lunacy, we've got Adam Schiff, who was questioning Ann Bondi, and over the course of their, I think, 2 days of hearings. But Adam Schiff really tried to go after Pam Bondi, trying to make it look like she just, unless she answered yes, I will say no to Donald Trump about this, and that, the other thing, then she just wasn't, up to the challenge or up to the job. But Adam Schiff, again, trying to make it look as though, unless you run in and tell Donald Trump you didn't win the 2020 election, or run in and tell Donald Trump, I refuse to prosecute Jack Smith because there's nothing there. It's so much theatrics, but of course, what do you expect from Adam Schiff?
It's a battle of the mentally incompetent and the intelligent. I mean, Adam Schiff is no intellect. He's a mouthpiece for the far left. That's why he got elected. That's why he's always gotten elected. He carries the water and makes sure the narrative is advanced. That's it. He talks a good game at the fundraisers. That's it. He got his script of gotcha questions and tried to advance them. And as he got slapped around intellectually on the brain stage, he just kept going. He's on the same intellect as Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, who just was gonna ask the questions. Doesn't matter if the answer was no. Gonna keep answering the questions and say that you said yes. I'm gonna talk over you. I'm gonna keep asking the same questions. I'm gonna demand that your answer is what I want it to be, and then I'm gonna say, evidently you mean yes, and move on.
I know. Frank, we've got the inauguration coming up. We know that things are going to start changing pretty quick on day one. We've got a lot of executive orders. They can be challenged, though. Obviously, they'll go judge shopping on a lot of these. But really, the legislation is going to be what's really going to start bringing about lasting change, I think.
Yeah, and this is, I'm left scratching my head a lot of times when I hear intelligent people saying, boy, it's going to be really hard to overcome these executive orders. Executive orders can be reversed with the stroke of a pen.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is. Biden did it within the first hour. He reversed hundreds and hundreds of Trump executive orders. So the same thing happens with an executive order. Doesn't go with the office, it goes with the president. Mm-hmm. Okay, so even if he tells an agency head or a department that I want you to create a new regulation and get it out there before this guy takes office, okay, the new executive can come in and say, suspend that regulation. Suspend it until we can actually get legislation that does something about it. The executive runs the executive branch. That's a constitutional statement, not an opinion. The president doesn't serve at the whim of the EPA director or the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Defense or the director of the IRS. They all work for him. And if they don't follow his directives because they serve at the pleasure of the president, he can dismiss them.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea, and you hear it in the news all the time, he's going to have a tough time turning over Joe Biden's directive on this. No, he's not. You just say, we're not doing that. And if it doesn't happen immediately, you, my friend, are out of a job. So
indeed. Yeah.
This idea that it's more than a decision is a little odd to me. And hey, he's the president. I've said this a few times, and I said it a bunch of times during his last administration. The very first thing he must do after giving his speech, before he goes to the parties is to go over to the DOJ, go over to the State Department, and tell people, thanks for your service, you're done. Pack your stuff and get out. You know, everybody got shocked that Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. I hope that we see a culling at the executive and middle managed level of bureaucrats in the deep state apparatus on day one. That's it. We've had time to figure out who the political activists are here and who doesn't follow directives. I think they said that they found out that almost 40% of the upper level managers in the bureaucracy just weren't all that hot about the incoming Trump administration's agenda. I don't care.
Right.
It's not your purview. Did I ask your opinion on whether you liked it or not? Your job is to do this. Execute or you're fired.
Yep. That's exactly what he should be saying. And you know, too, Frank, it looks like we now know who Governor DeSantis is going to want to appoint in place of Marco Rubio, who obviously is coming out of the Senate to go be Secretary of State. But it's going to be Florida AG Ashley Moody. What do you think about the pick?
I think it's a great pick. She did a great job as Florida's Attorney General. And there were some people who were vying for the position who just didn't deserve it. I think she'll do a great job. She brings another common sense and constitutional approach to government to Washington, and I wish her every success. I think it's a great pick.
Excellent. No, I completely agree. And you know, it's interesting because early on there was talk about Laura Trump, and that fell through pretty quick, as I recall.
Oh, it got people foaming at the mouth on the left, didn't it?
Yeah.
There was even talk about a resurgence of the Democrat Party in Florida, which didn't materialize.
Right.
You know, when you've got idiots like Nikki Fried to lead the party in Florida, you don't have to worry too much about it. You just have to make sure that you keep them on their toes. And what he did, dangled the name Trump in front of him for a little bit, and they didn't know where he was going. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's how you play the game. Throw a bright, shiny thing in front of an idiot neo-Marxist, and they'll do idiotic things. So I'm hard pressed to find something that Ron DeSantis hasn't done correctly. I really am. Through his tenure, we've had nothing but smart, constitutional, common sense, good for the people choices. And I, for one, will wear a black armband for a little bit on the day that he has to leave office. I think he's served Florida in an amazing way, set an example and a high bar for all of the people to come in his aftermath. And I'm proud to be a Floridian.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we had a great call in hour number one. It was Mike in Clearwater, and he talked about the idea of the tale of the two states, Florida and California, in terms of how the preparations are done or disasters are responded to and or anticipated. And it really is a stark contrast what Governor DeSantis does and what Florida does in general to be able to be prepared to get people back and, up and running with their power and all kinds of help after a terrible storm, hurricane. But California just seemed like it just literally fell off the map with this whole thing. So it is a difference in ideologies and a real difference in philosophies.
Oh, absolutely. If you compare people like DeSantis and Abbott in Texas and Youngkin in Virginia with Hochul in New York, Pritzker in Illinois, and Newsom in California, you see a stark difference in how good government works and ideological government doesn't work. You're seeing a failure in government in California, Illinois, and New York. That's why people are leaving. They're voting with their feet. They're leaving. They don't want to be there anymore. The taxes are too high. The regulations are too much. And the imposition on people's individual freedoms is enormous. Rights are diminished in those blue states, and crime is through the roof. Industry is leaving. Businesses are gone. But you go to Texas, you go to Florida, you go to Virginia, and populations are booming. Why? Because they're some of the freest states in the United States. Throw in Tennessee, you have another one, another state that's just exploding with people wanting to be there. No state income tax, less regulation, more freedom to choose, more freedom to start businesses and entrepreneurships. When government gets out of the way and you have stewards of those governments that protect the people from an overreaching government like they have in Texas and Florida and Virginia and Tennessee and South Dakota, then you see people thrive. That's why people want to move there.
Well, exactly. And when you talk about the idea, getting government out of the way, that is such an anathema to the left and to the liberal, the Democrat Party elite, because to them, the government is the only answer, and that's almost it's a blasphemy to say otherwise.
Yeah, big government, nanny state stuff doesn't work.
Frank, there was an article on Fox News' website, Fox Business, as a matter of fact, and they quote the Los Angeles Fire Department Chief Kristen Crowley, and she says basically that they had been at a breaking point. She says we're at that breaking point where firefighters can no longer do more with less. She said this in May of last year in the budgeting process. Then she went on to say something that I thought was really shocking, and I wanted to ask you about it because, of course, you're a retired firefighter yourself, and basically it looks like you have about, in major cities, you have about one firefighter per 1,000, I should say you have 2.5 firefighters per 1,000 residents. In L.A., they were less than one firefighter per 1,000 residents, just for openers. I mean, there was so much mismanagement, budget cuts, equipment sitting idle. They don't have the mechanics to fix the trucks, I guess. I mean, this is was a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, it was, and that's a failure of leadership. Say what you want about her whining about the budget. A responsible fire chief would have looked at that and said, well, I guess we have to stop non-essential programs within the department to be able to be manned at 100%. And the first non-essential department would have been the DEI Bureau.
There you go.
But that couldn't have been eliminated because it's Los freaking Angeles. So
you're right. Yeah.
So you've got to have your idiotic, inconsequential, doesn't help put out a fire department that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And where most of the country is running away from that with their hair on fire, don't mean to make fun of the issue.
Yeah, I hear you.
You've still got people who have jobs with that in their title. It's just ridiculous. It's inane at every level. Now, that aside, it's, the chief goes before the city council or the village board or whatever you have and presents a budget. The city council and the president of that council or the mayor of the village, or mayor of the town, they have to advocate for that budget for their department heads. Karen Bass did not do that. She didn't care to find out why the budget request was important. I bet you she didn't even go through the budget line by line, which is really her job. So absolutely delinquent in her responsibility to the people of L.A. She was way too much more impressed with being the mayor than actually doing the job of mayor.
I'm so glad you said that, because it seems to me, Frank, that a lot of these Democrat officials, as they are, elected officials, it's like they're just in a rotation, like, okay, you're going to be this for a while, and then you're going to be mayor, okay? And then after you're mayor, then we could probably get you to be governor. And then it's like they're just marking time. And you're right, they're not doing the work. And that's a huge difference between somebody like Governor DeSantis and the example he sets in Florida.
Oh, absolutely. And you don't really see a revolving door in Florida politics either. When you look at the blue states, you see a revolving door at the top, or people who never leave, who just get shuffled around. But mark my words, if Kamala Harris still wants to be in public life, when she goes back to California, she'll pop up somewhere. It's not like the far left ever learns their lesson that, you know what, your ideology didn't work. And in the case of California, not only didn't it work, it cost people their homes. It cost some people their lives. It cost whole towns to be erased. It's not going to be that because your ideology was input, this was the result, so maybe you should change the way you think because it didn't work. It's going to be, obviously, it wasn't applied correctly.
That's right. You're right on the target with that. Haven't we heard that throughout history? Oh, no, well, communism is actually pretty good, just never been tried just the right way because somebody got in its way on that thing.
Yeah, it's the Bernie Sanders vomit. Socialism just needs to be applied correctly, and we have to have good comrades in charge of making sure it happens correctly, and then it will work. The only way totalitarian ideologies work is at the pointing of a gun. That's the only way it works, and even then it doesn't. Look at Venezuela. Look at Cuba. If they weren't puppet governments of larger nation states that are also totalitarian, who've actually got money, people would have had revolutions long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So people just need to open their eyes, especially people on the very far left who believe in this garbage ideology. Totalitarianism doesn't work. Authoritarianism doesn't work. When you get government out of the way and give people more freedom, when government is the apparatus that maintains an equal playing field for all, an opportunity for all, not equity of outcomes, but the equality of opportunity, then you see people thrive. And that doesn't happen in socialism or communism.
Well, and because what you're describing, Frank, is much more sort of the natural flow of things. And when you're talking about communism, socialism, and so forth, it is sort of marketed as this is the way it should be, but it's so against the way that actual success happens, and to be able to actually create the wealth that needs to be there to be able to administer things like the fire department, things like that. It's really interesting because they constantly try to make it look as though people who are capitalists or conservative, that they are the ones who are somehow authoritarian, like you're describing.
There's a great free course by Hillsdale College on communism and socialism. And if people are looking for something to listen to that is not only entertaining, but educational, you come away learning something, take it. The basic core of the purpose of government, people got together where there were no governments in the very beginning and said, you know what, we need someone to protect our stuff when we're away from where we live. So we'll all band together and we pick you, Mr. Sheriff, to make sure that our stuff is safe. That expanded into, okay, Mr. Franklin had a great idea with these people who run at the clang of a bell when there's a fire in town. These group of people come. We all join together to keep our stuff safe.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't create a government to tell you whether or not you can have a gas dryer or a gas stove, or that you can't have a gasoline-powered vehicle and it has to be electric. That's not what government was created for. That's ideological social engineering.
Mm-hmm.
No, that happens in communist China, in Cuba, in Venezuela, and it happened in the old Soviet Union. Even the old Soviet Union realized they had to let capitalism in,
right.
and that in order for their economies to work, they had to get government out of the way.
Yep, exactly.
So if our arch nemesis, the USSR, which doesn't exist on the face of the earth anymore, perished because of the stupid neo-Marxist ideology, why does anybody think it can work anywhere else?
Well, exactly. And of course, just because you have other countries that go that direction or constantly try to impose that onto the people, it just reinforces, Frank, I think, why the U.S. is so special and special in history, because it's only been there in history for really kind of a blip, because the default is ruling over the people. That's one of the reasons why we are so special in this country.
Yeah, when we celebrate our longevity, it's because this experiment in self-government is new. It's not because we're the longest republic. It's because we've been the most republic, even with all our flaws.
Yep.
That's so. You celebrate being part of it, but don't bring failed ideologies in to try to change it. If you want that, go live there.
Well said. Well said.
You're listening to Underground USA.
The foundation of our great nation lies in our unwavering commitment to freedom, and at its core is the principle of free speech. It's not just a right, but a duty to speak our minds, respectfully debate, and challenge ideas. Today, free speech is under attack by the forces of the deep state and the globalists. We must all do our part to protect free speech, for without it, we'd be lost in a sea of woke conformity and censorship. We have the right. Protect it.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes straight into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and the dying breed of fact-checkers. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And if you have the wherewithal, please support what we do. Become a paid subscriber. It costs less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks once a month, and you get a lot more worth for the dollar you spend. And remember to talk politics, current events, religion, with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, we realize that we have more in common than we do in difference. That's the melting pot, e pluribus unum is achieved, and the deep state gets castrated. Boy, isn't that a vision I just put in your head. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no wokeism, no political correctness. My name is Frank Salvato.